I've never seen anything quite like it. It's a scandal that goes straight to the top of the ivory tower, involving Harvard's president, or I should say former president, as she resigned in light of attacks against her. It involves a billionaire and his wife, academic turned entrepreneur, and behind it, even geopolitical crisis. All the makings of a Hollywood script. Today, here, Professor David Stuckler, we're gonna dig into this, and it's all about plagiarism. I'm gonna share what you need to know so that you don't ever expose yourself to a risk of hot water like these esteemed individuals found themselves in. I'm gonna give you a framework to work from, and I'm even gonna show you a free plagiarism checker that you can use yourself today, and I recommend using for every document that you do going forward so that you are safeguarded from vicious attacks yourself, should they ever arise in the future. So let's dive straight in. The big concern around plagiarism is that somebody takes an idea that was not their own and cons it off as if it were theirs in the first place. Like, we can all agree that's just grossly illegitimate and bad behavior. Now, in the intellectual history of ideas, it may not be as straightforward as it seems on first brush. I routinely encourage my students to stand on the shoulders of giants, as the cliche goes, so that they can see far. Inevitably, what that means is we are building upon each other. Now, there are cases in science where there's a big departure from past knowledge, sometimes called a paradigm shift, and it's very clear that the new idea that enters into the playing field is very distant from what came before. But the most common evolution that many of you will be contributing to will be kind of a brick by brick, almost like in science we're building a big tower of science and advancing step by step, building off who came just before us. And this is why I encourage all my students to really have clarity in establishing their originality by always conducting a preliminary literature review, and you'll see this in the background introduction section of most papers, where you review what do we know and what do we not know, and what's my idea to fill that gap. By the way, we have a free training on the gap, which if you don't know what your gap is, you need to understand it before going any further. So by articulating that gap in your idea, you're effectively creating that important distance to specify, hey, here's what's new, here's what's mine, and here were those bricks that came before I ever got to this point. So here is where we start to see how Harvard's president got herself in trouble. Before I get into that though, I want to share with you an important tool, and it's through Grammarly, something I recommend to everybody to use in their Word documents, especially if English is not your first language, because it will check your grammar, but it will also check for plagiarism. So I've pulled up an example here from a paper with a student I'm working on. For you to find this, and it's completely free, there are other tools out there, but I recommend, in the spirit of this channel, wanting to democratize higher education, free resources. So let's turn over to Google. Now I'm going to search Grammarly and plagiarism checker. And you can go straight here. And you have the option to upload your document. So I'm going to upload one that I was working on here on artificial intelligence and second opinions in medicine. Scan for plagiarism. It's really that simple. And what it's going to do is it's going to say, oh, well, no plagiarism found. And it will give you some grammar advices. You subscribe to premium, you'll get more information. Now, the way most of these checkers work, and the most prominent of them is Turnitin, used by academic institutions, is they look for similarity. It's how similar is your document to billions and billions of other documents that are in their system. And this system has grown massively because it takes from published articles, but also takes from student submissions. So every time a professor uploads a student document, it gets registered inside its database. Now, if you ever do use this yourself, some academic institutions make it available to you. Make sure you tick the box to say you don't want your document uploaded, because it has happened that a student has uploaded their document to check for plagiarism, submit it later, and it showed that it was copying somebody else's document, which was actually their own in the first place. So do watch out for that. But I recommend doing this all the time. And for you to really understand the framework of plagiarism and what this is trying to detect, I want to go through some cases. I pulled up a Word document where I've actually plagiarized somebody to show you what the issue is that got Harvard's president into some hot water. So let me pull up this Word document. Okay, here we are. So I've taken this from sociologist Nick Lee in 1998. And as you can see, in this case, if I want to verbatim quote somebody, I need to have quotations and I need to have the citation. Both are indispensable. If you do this without the quotations, that is a risk of plagiarism. Some people might view this as a little bit borderline. I view this as plagiarism because this is their wording, their phrasing. Now, if you paraphrase this and keep the cite, that's totally okay. So let's say we say something like Lee and colleagues describe networks as an emergent property or something, whatever you want to say. and you put the quote 1998 because you always said to colleagues, that's totally okay. But if you're going to use verbatim, then make sure you got quotes around it. Now, what happened in the case of Harvard's president? The new generation of tools, ones that didn't exist at the time, where she actually won Harvard's dissertation prize that year for the best political science dissertation, is in her hundreds of pages of her dissertation, she had the wrong citation. Something like, let's say, 1990. Okay. Whether this is the plagiarism as we think of it, taking somebody's idea as your own, I don't think so. I think this is a relatively minor instance and looks like a clerical error to my eye. So this was one of the offending passages. She had a few series of miscited errors. The way you can avoid this is use a reference manager. Now, it didn't exist at the time, but you need a reference manager for big documents, and always go through, check your references, because it's very easy in the course of editing that something gets lost along the way. Again, I'll say this is very hard to detect with plagiarism checkers, and that those who went after Harvard's president were using even a new generation of AI checkers to help them that will be unlikely to be picked up by Turnitin. I'm not advocating this at all, don't get me wrong, but I want you to be aware of the potential stakes, how high they are, destroying a career, and what you need to do to protect yourself. Now, the second offending area was effectively in the acknowledgement section of her dissertation. Now, I told you a catchphrase I often use, standing on the shoulders of giants. So if I had said something, I want to thank my supervisor for, I don't know, helping me to stand on the shoulders of giants, stand on the shoulders of giants could be flagged and look like I had taken it from somebody else. And that was the case in her dissertation. She made an acknowledgement using a phrase that was picked up in another dissertation and treated as an unattributed citation. Again, is this taking somebody else's idea as your own? No, but this is common. You might say, we used something very common in the field, multivariate regression. Do we need to cite this commonly used tool? Well, if it was just recently invented and this was a brick that was just added, you probably do need to cite who did it. But is this long-standing workhorse in the field, multivariate regression, do you need to cite that? I wouldn't even know who to cite in this case, maybe a textbook. So again, you can see that the line here can become a little bit fuzzy and a little bit uncertain. Again, the best way to protect yourself is always to run through that free plagiarism checker that's imperfect as it is, and make sure you're acting in integrity. Always err on the side of citing too much. Now, ironically, after those accusers brought the accusations against Harvard's president, one of those who was involved directly or indirectly, I don't know the people involved, don't want to wait in the middle of it, Bill Ackman, retaliation came for his wife, and they scanned her dissertation and found the same kinds of offending passages. You can see just how slippery it can be with clerical errors and miscitations. She later apologized. You just begin to see how easy it is to slip into this trap. And I imagine if we went through and scanned lots of dissertations, these kind of clerical errors would be involved in many of them. Again, I don't want to scare you, but I do want to support you in this journey. And my take is, if you have original ideas, you're not just copying and pasting blindly, you're gonna be okay. That said, do join my Facebook group, Fast Track Grad. We've got tons of trainings. We're going to help you use a reference manager. If you're not using one now, it's going to save you a ton of time and help you avoid these kinds of issues. We also have master classes. We just did one on multivariate regression that I would love to make available to you. Some people have said that this has changed the way they view quantitative data, and has one person even said, this has saved my research life. So I hope to see you there. We can be in touch in the direct messages, and look forward to seeing you in the next video.